Hi, I'm Dr. Patty Barch, founder and owner of Naturally Unbridled Wellness in Onalaska, Wisconsin. If you've been following my videos, you know I have a very strong background in science and biotechnology, as well as 2 doctorates in natural health. I won't get into all of my credentials here in this video. First, let me say that the information presented here is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prescribe for any disease or condition. Please consult your preferred healthcare provider, mainstream media, elected official, and social media fact checkers when making wellness choices. This video is going to be talking about some of the arm injuries that have been happening over the past 2 years, what happens in the body with some of that technology, and some of the things that we have been seeing in the wellness centers that are related to these arm injuries. So the first thing I want to give a quick explanation of is the emergency use authorization versus an FDA approved product. Emergency use authorization says there's a situation here and we have nothing to treat it, so we have to skip some of our standard testing processes in order to get something to help people as soon as possible, and some steps will be skipped. Versus FDA approved, which is goes through all of the processes to test it for safety, efficacy, etc. If they identify a treatment for the situation from a product that has already gone through the FDA approval process, then the emergency use authorization is supposed to be shut down so that experimental products can no longer be used because there's something that's already been through proper testing. That is why the Nobel Prize winning drugs and drugs that have been on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines, those pharmaceuticals have been swept aside so that we could get these emergency use authorization products out there. So I'm not going to talk about the virus vector, the adenovirus vector arm injuries at this point. I'm only going to talk about the ones with genetic material, with the messenger RNA. So just a quick thing about the FDA approval thing. So you know that the Pfizer product has been FDA approved. It's called Comirnaty, but you cannot get that injection. You cannot find a vial with the Comirnaty label on it and be injected with it. You're still being injected with the emergency use authorization Pfizer BioNTech number product. The reason is if they inject you with the FDA approved product Comirnaty, then there is liability associated with it. However, if they inject you with a product that's labeled the experimental use authorization label, the Pfizer BioNTech product, they are immune, no pun intended, from any liability. So you cannot get the FDA approved product here or anywhere because of the liability issue. So they approved it to basically keep people from saying, well, it's not FDA approved, but then you can't get the approved product. The mistake that they made from their shareholders' point of view is that they got it approved, and the FDA is therefore required to release the documents, the data that they use to decide that this product was safe and effective and should get full approval. The FDA decided they were not going to release those documents, but they were sued because the American taxpayers pay the FDA to do their job, and they are accountable to the taxpayers. So the FDA was sued, and they had to start releasing the data that they asked for between 50 and 75 years to release. So the lawsuit resulted in them releasing batches of document, tens of thousands of pages every month for about a year, 10 months or so. So there's been a few batches that have been released, and some of that data is quite interesting. So messenger RNA typically has 4 nucleic acids that pair up in different orders to transcribe for proteins. I know it's molecular biology, bear with me. One of the nucleic acids in messenger RNA is uracil. This regular mRNA is a very unstable molecule. It doesn't stick around for more than like 15 minutes or so in the bloodstream. The body just breaks it down really easily. It's not a stable molecule. And the scientists knew this. So what they did was they took out the naturally existing nucleic acid called uracil and they replaced it with a synthetic version called pseudouridine. And the pseudouridine makes that RNA molecule more stable, meaning it stays in the body longer. It doesn't break down. And actually, they haven't figured out, or at least in the data that's been released so far, they haven't figured out how long it sticks around for. So it could be indefinite. It could be a situation where the body has is unable to break down that molecule into its components and excrete it from the body. It may be so stable that that code to produce that pointy protein and therefore create antibodies and create massive amounts of inflammation, because the pointy protein is a cytotoxic molecule that's been well established. So when they first did the studies, they injected the arm injuries into that muscle, and they sort of expected that it would stay there. But what they found in a biodistribution study based in Japan is that it doesn't actually stay where the arm injury happens. It goes systemically throughout the body with the highest concentrations, some of the highest concentrations in the ovaries. The lipid nanomolecule transport system, which was developed for chemotherapeutic drugs to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier. This particular lipid nanoparticle has an affinity for certain tissues based on the electrical charge of the molecule, and the ovaries are one of the tissues that have a high affinity for these molecules. So we have been seeing the countless reports of women who, by the way, have been gaslighted, that have had menstrual irregularities. So anything from rampant periods that won't stop. I know of women who have had emergency hysterectomies. They've had emergency intrauterine device, or IUD, installed to try to stop the bleeding. They've been put on birth control to stop the bleeding. I have a 21-year-old client who got her 2 shots to go back to college, and she hasn't had a period since it had been 295 days when I met with her. I also have a colleague who has been working with a particular family for many years, including before the birth of their children. The daughters were 6 and 8 years old when they had their arm injuries, and they had some issues develop, but including the development of pubic hair in a 6 and 8 year old. So the impact on the ovaries could be significant. I'll also say that if you're familiar with me and my work, you know that I have been supporting fertility clients for more than 10 years with really impressive results. And when it comes to women who have had this particular arm injury, I can only think of one client who successfully got pregnant after having that. And actually she miscarried that first pregnancy. And then the last I heard, she was pregnant again, and hopefully that all works out. But this is something to pay attention to. Lots of women having menstrual issues and fertility issues, and it could be because of the affinity of this lipid nanoparticle for the ovaries. Other issues that we're seeing that I won't get into a ton of detail here is we're definitely seeing an exacerbation or generation of autoimmune issues, and that's due to something called molecular mimicry. Anytime your body makes antibodies against a foreign protein, there's the chance that those antibodies might match another tissue in your body. And so we're seeing people who have new autoimmune diagnoses since they have had their arm injuries. And then we're also seeing people who have pre-existing autoimmune issues that went off the rails. And I actually have done other videos about that. Speaking of off the rails, that's exactly the words that another client who, she's not a fertility client, but she's looking for help with her menstrual cycle because it's all over the place. She literally says it's been off the rails for about 6 months. And 6 months ago, she got number 3 arm injury. We're also seeing some neurological issues, tremors, seizures, those sorts of things. And like I said, that lipid nanoparticle had been in development for the delivery of chemotherapeutic agents across the blood-brain barrier because they know that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So there's the possibility that these arm injuries crossed the blood-brain barrier and perhaps created antibodies against neurological tissue. Countless cardiac issues. I have never heard in my over 50 years of life, I cannot recall so many people who are having cardiac issues, cardiac events, heart attacks, strokes, blood clots, and the number of people that I now know who have had pacemakers installed within the past 2 years far exceeds the cumulative amount of people that I knew with pacemakers prior to 2 years ago. Probably the most upsetting thing about what we've been seeing in the past 2 years is the development of highly aggressive cancers. So remember that mRNA is genetic material and cancer is from cells that forgot how to divide, right? Something goes wrong in the genetic material of the cell so that they don't have their off switch anymore and they just reproduce, and then that creates a tumor, and then those little pieces of tumor can break off and get into the blood or the lymph and then spread throughout the body and you get metastatic cancers. And sadly, we're seeing cancers really take off like wildfire. Pre-existing cancers going crazy, and then new cancers popping up. So those are other things to keep an eye on. And then just one other thing to add to that is that the original strain of this, let's say Chinese bug, is gone. It's been gone for a really long time. It mutated out of existence. And so the experimental arm injuries, those are targeted at something that doesn't exist anymore. So in my opinion, it's malpractice to give somebody a product for a pathogen that no longer exists. Never mind all of the other information that we've learned over the past 2 years. Now, I've been doing videos for this since the onset, and I have been saying that these processes typically take at least 5, usually closer to 10 years, so that they can track these sorts of things and determine the safety of such products. And so to have said that no safety steps were skipped is simply untrue, because if they don't have a time machine, and if this could be done in a shorter period of time, there's no reason why the pharmaceutical industry and the government organizations would have required it to take 10 years before. So the last thing I'm going to cover is what the heck can you do about it? And that's the hardest question of all. And we're learning every day by trying to help different clients with different issues. And the simplest thing I can tell you to do is to be and get as healthy as possible. Eat an anti-inflammatory diet. Nothing you eat or drink is neutral. It's either feeding inflammation or fighting inflammation. And inflammation is the gateway to chronic disease. Since the pointy protein is an inflammatory molecule, you want to be able to shut down inflammation as much as possible so that your immune system isn't constantly in a state of high alert, if that is possible. So drinking water, getting exercise, eating whole foods, avoiding what I call anti-nutrients, which are the artificial colors, flavors, sweeteners, and preservatives. There are certain homeopathic, herbal, and nutritional products that we are seeing some success with, as well as some holistic services, some that we offer here in the office and some that we refer out for, just to try to support the body. Thankfully, we are seeing some really good successes, which is inspirational, because this is heavy work, and we're really sad to see that these people are dealing with long-term consequences for a decision that they made under false pretenses. So I know that was a ton of information. I try to talk fast to keep these videos on the shorter side, but I have more videos on this topic ruminating in my brain, and there'll be more to come. So in the meantime, please get and be as healthy as possible, and peace out, peeps.